Hi guys, Jane here, and it is February, which means it is Romance Month. And today I am going to talk about the characters in a romance novel. I'm going to be doing videos all month on related to writing romance. I am a romance writer myself, and I'm also a romance reader. So very near and dear to my heart, I want great romances in the world so that I can read them, and I have some experience writing romance, so I feel like I have knowledge to share. The first thing I want to cover is point of view. In a romance novel, most romances, as far as like the default, the one that I see most commonly, is third person alternating point of view. So you have the guy's perspective and the girl's perspective, back and forth throughout the book. And one of the things that's really nice about that is that both characters end up well developed. You absolutely can do third person limited with one point of view, and you absolutely can do first person. The challenge with those tends to be making sure that you develop the other characters. So you got to have ample opportunity to develop them, and it can really ruin a book if they're not well developed. I had a read last month that had that issue. The female was, I think she was meant to be kind of sassy and kind of like a strong woman, but she just came off as like kind of a bitch because we didn't get her perspective, and she just, I don't know, I didn't like her. And so I couldn't root for their romance, like, at all. The one point of view I wouldn't try to do is omniscient, because romances are very character-driven stories. And omniscient generally is too far back from the action for the reader to feel close to the characters. So it's really hard to get the emotional connection with the characters that you have in third person limited or even first person as you would in omniscient. Omniscient doesn't, in my opinion, work well for the romance genre. So if you are writing a romance and you don't know what perspective to use, I suggest third person limited alternating. If that's not the one you want to use, then, first person or third person, but one point of view is fine too. You just have to make sure you create opportunities to develop the love interest adequately. Also, YA, young adult and new adult, and also paranormal. I see quite a bit of first person in those. So check your genre. If it's something that you see pop up a lot in your genre, definitely go for it. Always follow genre norms as a general rule, and also the trope. Whatever the trope is that you're writing, if you see a lot of books that have come out recently that are done that way, it's probably okay. But you also don't necessarily have to follow the trends if you have a good reason not to, or if it's just not for you and how you write. Next thing I want to talk about is writing female characters in a romance. And this can get tricky. A female character has to be strong, but also has to be, vulnerable enough to fall in love. She has to be a complete character in and of her own right. And that's one of the biggest things I don't see sometimes. I see girls who are thrown into the book just to be the love interest. And that can happen even in romance, is a girl who just doesn't have anything in her life outside of the boy. And that's all she can talk about. Whereas I think having a girl who has friends that aren't related to him and who has things in her life like a passion, a hobby, a job that she loves, adding any of those things to a character will help make her well-rounded, because you want a reason for the guy to fall in love with her. It can't just be like, oh, she's really cute. You want there to be some substance to her. You want something for the hero to connect to. So you also don't want like a damsel in distress, generally. Women these days are strong, and even if you're writing historical romance where women were kind of in that time viewed as weaker, they can be viewed that way, but you don't want to write a character that way unless you have a super good reason. We modern readers, and I'm speaking now as a romance reader more so than writer, we want a woman who we can relate to. I don't want to self-insert, and I do be careful about that, because I've heard people give advice that you shouldn't develop a female character too much because the readers want to self-insert. I don't necessarily think that's the case. It's certainly not the case for me as a reader. I don't feel that need to self-insert. I want a good, well-developed female character who I can like, who I can appreciate, and who, I can root for. But I don't need to feel like I'm pushing myself in the story. It doesn't need to be a choose-your-own-adventure romance for me. So yeah, don't make her too wimpy. Don't make her too bitchy either. That can be something that I see. There's a fine line between sassy and bitchy, and if you cross it, it can really ruin a romance because if we don't like her, we're not going to root for her. So those are some of the things to watch. Well-rounded character, just somebody who you would like to hang out with and who you can see why the hero falls in love with her in the first place. Another thing of note is try not to over-sexualize her if you are describing her from her own perspective. It's fine if you're doing a third-person alternating point of view for him to kind of notice her boobs and her butt, but generally that's not a thing a woman notices about herself. If you're writing a single point of view, some things you can do to describe a character is maybe have her mirror, I look a lot like my sister, here's what my sister looks like, except that I have whatever. I have red hair and she's a blonde, or, however they might be different. That way you don't have to do the, I'm standing in front of a mirror describing my cantaloupe-shaped boobs. And yes, that's really a thing and it happens, and please don't do it. So yeah, those are all important things about writing the heroine. And I don't think the heroine is necessarily the most important character in the story. I think both the hero and heroine are pretty important, especially for alternating perspectives. I love a strong heroine who also, is a generally good person, has interests, and who I would want to be her bestie. I'm going to totally root for her to get the guy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about heroes. There are two main types of heroes that we see in romance, and I want to read you some quotes about these heroes because I think they were valuable quotes. Doreen Owens-Malik says that an alpha male is a strong, dominant, aggressive male brought to the point of surrender by a female. There's a lot of alpha males in romance. They're most common, I would say, in I see them a lot in the paranormal, supernatural, especially if you've got an actual alpha werewolf. I see them also sometimes in the rakes and the dukes in historical, particularly men who have never been around women and don't really know that you can connect with them except for, physically. They just haven't been around women and think that women are just for bedding. So those are some of the alpha male traits that you see quite a lot in romances. These men tend to be very high testosterone. They tend to have strong jobs. Oh, also Billionaire Tropes. You see quite a few alpha males in Billionaires. So, the high-powered CEO who's going to be kind of a jerk to a girl. And here's the thing you have to be so careful of. Not to push it too far. You want the reader to be able to want to root for the relationship, and they're not going to do that if the guy is a complete and total jerk and irredeemable. You have to be really careful about going from alpha male to abuser. And that's one thing I see complained about a lot on BookTube, because I watch a lot of BookTube, and particularly when they're talking about romance, is, the guy was abusive and I couldn't read any further. I didn't like it because he was too much of a jerk. You can have a guy who's a jerk but not abusive. And in some cases, you can have a guy who's pretty borderline abusive but gets redeemed. There's a Virginia Henley book, I believe, that is called Tempted. But the main character, the guy, I think his name is Ram, he is a real jerk. He thinks that the girl he's married to, that he's forced into a marriage to, loose woman, is kind of a slut. And he actually, on their wedding night, rapes her. And it's a pretty rough, pretty harrowing scene. But that is one of the books that I feel like, for myself as a reader, he was redeemed later. Like, we understood why he did what he did, and yes, it was terrible, and no, I'm never, ever, ever for rape. And for a modern reader, like, maybe you shouldn't go there or do that. But again, this might be something to read for just an example of, you can go pretty far, but you have to turn it around and make him a redeemable character. And again, for some readers, he was never redeemable. I read reviews on that book, and oh my goodness, some people were like, nope, too much. And that is kind of a matter of taste. For historical readers, I think we can go a little bit further because just of the knowledge that in that time, guys were raised differently. But again, you have to, if you're making them really, really terrible, they have to be redeemable. Otherwise, we're not going to root for them. And generally, I do not love alpha males. I just got to tell you, it's not my favorite. If I hear a book has an alpha male, I'm probably not going to read it. Unless it's like an author I love and I trust that she's really going to turn it around for me. All right, so now I want to read you about the beta male. Beta males happen to be what I love. They are my favorite in romance. Elizabeth Vale says, beta males are usually mild-mannered. Their seduction is more verbal and intellectual rather than physical and aggressive. And these are the kind of males that I tend to write, and they are the kind of males that I tend to love to read about. I love my beta males. One of my favorite examples of a beta male is the hero from Simply Love by Mary Balogh. A sweet, good guy. Doesn't mean he doesn't have issues. Doesn't mean that, he's perfect. Doesn't even mean that, he's not sexually interested. Because that makes it sound like he's kind of, not. But a man can be those things and still be polite and still be trying to get in the girl's pants, but not in the push her up against the car and kiss her kind of way, but instead like some mental sparring type thing. I love my beta males, and you see them a lot in things like religious romance. You do see them quite a bit in historical too, actually, especially like the mild-mannered farmer. You see it a lot in the tropes where there are children involved, whether it's an accidental pregnancy or whether they're already a parent and they fall in love with the governess. These men tend to be family men. They're tender, they're sweet. They want love. They might be scared of it, but they want it and they're not going to hurt a woman. And I really, really, really love my beta males. Generally, you can use alpha or beta males in either trope or in any trope in any subgenre, but just make sure that it works for your story. And if you are in doubt, and if you are writing to market, see what's most typical in your genre. Some genres, the guys tend to be alphas, and if you're trying to sell books, you're going to probably sell better to readers who like the alphas, because that's who's reading those books. And it's one of the reasons that I don't read nearly as much paranormal romance as I would like, is because I have a hard time finding beta males. That's why I write beta males in paranormal romance, even though it's not to market. Quick recap, alpha males, beta males are the two most common male tropes in romances. There are levels in between. There's all kinds of levels between alpha and beta male, but those are the two you most commonly hear. If you aren't sure, follow your story or follow the tropes of the genre. A lot of people, I think, have preferences and tend to write one or the other better, although in some books it may not work, and you can try having an alpha male and try a beta male and see what works best for you. But ultimately, we want him to be a good enough guy that we want the girl to get with him. We don't want him to be an abusive jerk who we are like, I don't understand why she fell for him. And that is a complaint I hear a lot on BookTube, is that the guy was just a jerk and they couldn't root for him. So keep that in mind. On the other hand, if you're doing a beta male, you don't want to make them too weak and too wimpy. We still want to believe that, if this guy's family was threatened, that he could handle it, that, he is still masculine. Don't emasculate him or feminize him just because he's a beta male. he doesn't have to sit around talking about his feelings all the time, but he's gonna be more willing to talk about his feelings than like a super beta male who's gonna, you know, be repressing all those feelings until the woman breaks him. So that's basically what I have today for you. Like and subscribe buttons below, as is the social media. I'll see you next week for more on the romance genre. Bye!